Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Quick turnaround, as always, for the National Football League. Dan Fetes is with us to preview the game coming up this week. Bills and Dolphins in South Florida. Dan, of course, covering the Bills in Rochester for ABC 13. And Dan, I mean, this is going to be one of those classic matchups, I feel like, on Thursday Night Football, added with, some extra stuff, I guess is the easiest way to say it, with what happened with the Dolphins off the field before the game. So naturally, I think high ratings are in store for Thursday night.
Yeah, and there's always high ratings when it's Josh Allen and it's against the Dolphins. For whatever reason, Josh has owned the Dolphins. He is 11-2 in his career against Miami, and the two seem to constantly take subtle jabs at one another. It was last year, the Dolphins posted all their social media with the thinking emoji. Josh Allen runs in a touchdown. His celebration is the emoji as well. So there's never a shortage of storylines when these two teams meet. That's for sure.
Yeah, and coming off, let's go back to the Bills here, and then we'll go to the matchup here. But, the Bills did not play well in that first half against Arizona. I mean, Kyler Murray was having his way with the defense of the Buffalo Bills. And then the second half, of course, was a different story. The Bills played a lot better. They gave up that kickoff return, and I think that's what kept them in the game. They ended up covering the spread, by the way. 6.5 was the point spread there. Anything to be concerned about with the Bills' defense here? Because certainly giving up several touchdowns, albeit one on a kick return, was not, I think, what people expected.
Yeah, I think the defensive line was a little bit of a concern for me. Obviously, I knew that Arizona had a good running game. James Conner ran the ball extremely well. And it's funny, could we call that vintage Kyler Murray? I know he's not been in the league that long, but when Kyler Murray is really good, that's what he looks like. They had the Bills off balance, and it was the first game that defensive coordinator Bobby Babich was calling plays. So I expected a little bit of a learning curve. But in classic Sean McDermott fashion, they made adjustments at halftime. We saw that a lot last year, Craig. There was times when the opening kickoff would go, the other team would march down the field, score in the opening drive, and I'm on the field, and my phone's blowing up in my mentions saying Sean McDermott can't coach, that he doesn't know what he's doing, he can't make any plays. And then he'd give up like 6 points the rest of the game. The Bills' defense is really good at making adjustments, and it's funny because they always talk about, halftime adjustments aren't really a thing. It's just a couple minutes. You go to the bathroom, you go back out in the field. But the Bills have done a really good job in the Sean McDermott era of making those adjustments. So the secondary was really good with DeMar Hamlin getting the start, Taylor Rapp in place. I think there was only something like 3 passes that were thrown against the two corners in Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford and only allowed 2 catches. Like the back half of the defense, even without Poyer and Micah Hyde, was still really good.
Yeah, and I think that's the key here because the Dolphins are going to try and throw on the Bills. There's no question about that. Before we get to that, you saw what happened last night on Monday Night Football, I'm sure, with Christian McCaffrey being declared out right before the game. Running back afterwards said he knew he was starting. We don't know if that's the case. So I'm always very careful with injuries in the NFL just to say this is much ado about nothing. So you tell me. I mean, Josh Allen scores that touchdown, looks at his wrist, says he's going to play, he's going to be fine. I don't buy anything anymore, Dan, honestly. Like at this point, I don't know what to believe in the NFL because they're able to keep this stuff so secretive. I know that's not going to affect his throwing at all, but what I don't want to say is, Dan, this is going to be a nothing, and then all of a sudden a snap is fumbled, and we go, hey, maybe he's not okay, So what is the latest there?
Well, he runs in, he hurdles Budda Baker, goes in the end zone, and as I'm watching it, it almost looks like he got up before to celebrate to like make sure he still had all of his arms and hands and was kind of looking around. And then we see him get taped up like an offensive lineman gets taped up on his left wrist. And again, Josh is as tough as they come. And Sean McDermott is usually pretty coy with the injury report. We know Taron Johnson's out, but he says we still have to do further research on the timetable for when he returns. But with Josh, he said he was cleared to go. Josh didn't wear any brace or anything like that when he went to the post-game press conference, got x-rays. He landed on his wrist, like there's no question. And more than anything, it seemed to impede his handoffs. I know that sounds weird, but it's his left hand. You're still handing the ball off on runs to the right side with your left hand as a quarterback. So that was a little clunky. And obviously, Craig, you can't do this all the time, right? Like it looked like Josh was playing in a playoff game that they needed to win to go to the Super Bowl. That was a little bit more of the concern, as we know that Josh is, a cyborg. He's a mutant when it comes to being 6'5" and 230 and being able to run over linebackers. But it was week 1. And we're already talking about an injury to Josh Allen. I know it's his non-throwing hand, but it's still hard not to think in the back of your head there's something to think of there. But again, clear to practice, will play Thursday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, we spent the whole preseason hearing again how this wasn't going to happen, and it happened immediately in week one of the NFL season. So this is an interesting prop here for his passing total, 240.5 going into this week. I didn't know that against the Dolphins over on FanDuel that he's gone over this total 6 games in a row against Miami. And so I still don't think we necessarily, Dan, have the answer to who is Josh Allen going to throw to all the time. I don't feel like we got that in this past game, but maybe we'll learn a little bit more on Thursday night.
Yeah, that was, again, I said I wasn't going to overreact on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel about the fact of I wasn't going to overreact to week one way or another. Josh took 10 snaps in the preseason. He only threw 3 passes and all of these new weapons. And I think the last time I was on your show, we talked about all these new wide receivers and how would they function. And we didn't know anything more before the preseason than we did after the preseason. And I don't know anything more about who Josh Allen's go-to guy is heading into week 2 than I did into week 1. The plus side is 10 different players, 10 different Bills, I believe, caught passes, but Dalton Kincaid only caught 1. No wide receiver had more than 3. Like, there is some concern that when the Bills get down and Josh needs to make a play on 3rd and 14, he's just going to go back into the phone booth, put on the Superman cape, and try and run over 10 Dolphins on Thursday night. It didn't look, like you said, a slow start. It didn't look like there was the rhythm. And you can talk about they should have played in the preseason or whatever. I don't buy that. It's about executing. And for the most part, it wasn't there yet. When will they get there? Hopefully soon. But again, it helps when you have Josh Allen, who is a unicorn on the football field.
No, it really is. I mean, I was told it would be Kincaid by default. That was not the case in week 1 where Buffalo scored 1 million points either. So we'll just keep watching, Dan. I know you will be too. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire as always.
Thanks again, guys.